There is a lot I want to talk about, but there are two series of games in particular that I've been wanting to talk about since I started this channel. Zelda and Persona. Of course, you read the title. Today's focus is on Zelda. I am a big Zelda fan. In fact, it is my favorite game series, with Final Fantasy being my second favorite. I find it not okay that I've only done one Zelda review, and that would be Link's Awakening for the Switch. And it's time to fix that starting now. I have been playing the series since Ocarina of Time, and as far as I can remember, I have been playing the series yearly since. Longtime viewers of mine have heard me say stuff like, as soon as I was born, Mario was there to greet me, and Super Mario 64 was the earliest game I remember playing, yada yada yada. I was born into a family who played video games, but to cut to the chase, Zelda came into my life very shortly after Mario 64 with Ocarina of Time. In the mid-80s, Shigeru Miyamoto was working on a Super Mario Bros. Compilation for the Famicom, aka the Japanese Nintendo Entertainment System. However, an add-on for the Famicom that would use discs was about to come out in Japan, but not anywhere else. Nintendo needed a launch title for it. Miyamoto-san wanted to take advantage of the system's ability to rewrite data. He attempted to create a game that would have two players make dungeons and then explore each other's creations. There is a feature like this in the Switch version of Link's Awakening, and with a few Mario Maker games out at this point, is there going to be a Zelda Maker sometime soon, Nintendo? Although with feedback, they decided that playing through the dungeons was the fun aspect of the game. So instead, a one-player game was made, and eventually a hub world, overworld, or whatever you want to call it, was created to have these dungeons grouped together and to have the player explore. Miyamoto was inspired by himself exploring the hillside and countrysides around his home. When it came time to name this game, he was not sure what to call it at first, but what he was sure of was he wanted to name the game The Legend of something. The PR planner suggested the name Zelda, named after Zelda Sayre Fitzgerald, who is the wife of F. Scott Fitzgerald, the author of The Great Gatsby, and thus the series was born. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this is my 100th video upload on YouTube. I appreciate my longtime viewers for watching the videos I have posted over the years, as well as the new people joining us today. With that being said, here is my review of The Legend of Zelda. Ganon, who is the Prince of Darkness, stole the Triforce of Power. Zelda broke the Triforce of Wisdom into 8 pieces, hid them from Ganon, gets kidnapped by his minions, and it's up to Link to find the pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom to rescue Zelda. The story is pretty simple, but the lore of Zelda has been vastly expanded upon as new games come out, and bits of it even slightly change and revise as time goes on. Many Zelda games have come out over the years, and sometime during the releases of all of these games came an official timeline confirmed in 2011 by Nintendo themselves. If the hero Link were to die during the events of Ocarina of Time, you would eventually come to the events of this game. The story, according to Hyrule Historia and the instruction manual, although the instruction manual has a busy background that makes the story hard to read. One day in the land of Hyrule, the Demon King Ganon led his army and took the Triforce of Power. The Princess of Hyrule, Zelda, took the Triforce of Wisdom, divided it into 8 pieces, and hid them throughout the kingdom. There is a Triforce of Courage, but that does not make an appearance in this game. So the question is, what is the Triforce? It is a relic separated into 3 parts, and together they are the ultimate source of power, able to grant the heart's desires of one who touches it. It was created and left behind by the goddesses of Hyrule, Nehru, Farour, and Din, which inspired the name of this channel. After they had created the land of Hyrule, Zelda ordered Impa, her nursemaid, to seek out one who would stand up to and defeat Ganon. Once Ganon found out about this, he was furious, thus captured and imprisoned Zelda, then sent his minions after Impa. Impa fled for her life, but once she could no longer flee and reached her limits, Ganon's minions surrounded her. Impa was almost captured, but then this game's incarnation of Link appeared, was able to drive off Ganon's henchmen and rescue Impa. Impa explained her situation to Link and thus began Link's adventure to gather the pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom. Once he had done that, he defeats Ganon, rescues Zelda, and returns peace to Hyrule. The story is pretty simple, but the lore of Zelda has been vastly expanded upon as new games come out, and bits of it even slightly change and revise as time goes on. When this game came out, the only thing that was said about the Triforce was just simply that it had mystical powers. It was a link to the past that explained that it granted wishes. Ocarina of Time explained that it was made by the goddesses after Hyrule was established. The story overall is what I should expect from an NES game, so how does the gameplay hold up? This game is an action-adventure title. 2014 was when I beat this game for the first time, and I played it again just recently for this review. You take control of Link. You can name him yourself if you want, but I'm going to be boring and just call him Link. One thing I have to commend is this game's save feature. You're probably thinking, wait, isn't it common knowledge for a game to have the save feature? Well, yeah, it's a basic requirement for a game these days. However, back then, a lot of games did not have the save feature. Having this feature was expensive at the time. So what happened back then was either people left their consoles on when they went to school or work and then come back and pick up where they left off. Or a game would have a password system where as you play, the game gives you a password, put said password in on the menu of the game, and pick up where you left off that way. Of course, some NES games were so short that it was probably a non-issue, although as a modern gamer, I need my save features. Link was called Link at one point because he was going to travel across time, and while that did happen eventually, the time travel idea was dropped for this game. So instead, he's called Link because you are linked to the game's world via him. You start off in the overworld of Hyrule, and well, the game is actually open world whether the developers intended it or not. One thing to note is, see that gray box? That's your map. No, I'm not kidding. That is actually your map, and that is all you'll get the entire time you're playing this game. Me, however, I am not using that gray box. I am going to use a real map outside of the game. That way I don't run around like a chicken with his head cut off. Although they seem to expect me to do that anyway because the instruction manual has a good portion of the map already revealed. And not only that, but on the next page here, it gives you instructions on how to make your own maps for the dungeons too, so I'm assuming you're supposed to fill in the white parts here as you keep exploring, but they probably did like this because of hardware limitations at the time, but I have the whole map pulled up on my iPad, so that's what I'll be using. I start by going into this cave to get the sword, and then in the overworld I make my way to the first dungeon of this game. The first dungeon is actually pretty easy to get to, and it's in a memorable location. You see how there's a body of water smack dab in the middle of the map here? And this is level 1. You can simply just cross the bridge here to get to it, and this is like the starting point whenever you load up your save file. You go up here, blah blah blah, alright, and that's how you would get to level 1. The layout of the first dungeon is pretty simple. While the overworld map only has the gray box with not much information on it, in dungeons you actually get the layout of the one you're in once you find the map in said dungeon. It even tells you where you've been when you bring up the menu, keys unlock doors. When you find the compass, you will see where a piece of the Triforce of Wisdom is. So in the case of the first dungeon, I found a bow, a boomerang which stuns enemies if I have it mapped to the B button, and an old man telling me Eastmost Peninsula is the secret. Okay, I'll check it out once I beat this dinosaur with the unicorn horn. Let me nab this piece of the Triforce real quick. Okay, now let's check out the secret to the easternmost peninsula, which is right here on the map. Alright, now I'm going to bomb this and... Gee, thanks! Nothing like being punished for my curiosity in a game. Okay, so because of the open world nature of the overworld, I decided to go to level 3 and come back to level 2 later. One nitpick I have on level 3 is you start here when you boot up the game and it's right over here. While I would say it is not in quite as memorable of a location as level 1, it's about as easy to get to, whereas level 2 is more difficult to get to just because it is further away and the roads to get to it are not as simple. I would say the enemy variety in this game is pretty solid, although I do not have an opinion on every single one of them. Level 3 introduces these dark nuts. Ugh, I hate dark nuts. You can't attack them from the front because they block your attacks, so you have to attack them from the side or behind. But when you do manage to land a hit on them, they don't experience knockback, boomerangs do not stun them, and when you do hit them on the side, they turn towards you, hurting you in the process. They suck. Also, the third dungeon is a Nazi swastika. After completing level 3, I go back to level 2 and it's pretty easy. Although the boss is a bit harder than level 1's boss because level 1's boss, you can just go ham with a sword on the dinosaur's horn. Although with the Dodongo here in level 2, you have to place bombs in front of his mouth and you have to time it right. Okay, so the dungeons have a pretty linear nature to them, although I find it to be that this and the open world nature of the overworld tends to clash with one another, I think. If you want, you can do level 3 before you do level 1, but I don't recommend it because of those dark nuts. The entire map is pretty much open for you to go anywhere you want, but the dungeons starting from level 1 gradually get harder. Not to mention, you have to get the raft from level 3 to get to level 4. It's where I would think just because you can does not mean you should, but that's just me. Level 4 introduces light-likes, which I always hated. They look so butt ugly and the color palette on them makes them look like someone threw up and the stuff that came out started moving. A little bit more of a complex layout than the ones before this one. You get the step ladder in this level, which I really like because you can walk over one square of water. I know I said these dungeons gradually get harder, but I will say I think this is easier than level 3 because there are no dark nuts. I then did level 6 and man, this one got me a bunch of times. I died here more than any other dungeon. You will die a lot in this game, generally speaking. A lot of enemies tend to gather in one room and it's a combination of Wizrobes and lifelikes. I had the blue tunic that raises defense in this dungeon too. I then did level 5. To get to level 5 you would have to go up the mountain. One thing I do not like in this game is when you have 3 options to pay someone to help you out and there are 2 caves of this nature that I found. Only one option gives you the information you need. You pay too little and she says this is not enough to talk. And you pay too much and she says, boy, you're rich. No kidding, Sherlock. Not to mention, rupees tend to be scarce in this game, but there is a gambling minigame where you just walk over one of 3 rupees, and if it's correct, you earn rupees, otherwise you lose them. I ended up cheating on this minigame with save states on my NES Classic. I would walk into the tree, create a save state, walk over the correct one, and repeat this process until I have max rupees. Some caves are helpful because they have shops, and some other caves even give you rupees as well. Some secret caves also have no in-game hint on how to find them, so I was never compelled to burn a random bush to find a secret. Level 5 was of course probably easier because for this review I did level 6 before it. Levels 7, 8, and 9 are tricky to figure out in regards to getting to them. I vaguely remembered playing the flute at this spot to open level 7 in 2014 when I first beat this game. There is an in-game hint to get to level 7. Level 8, the in-game hint to get to it is, there's a secret in a tree at the dead end. Let's see, is it this tree? No. Is it this tree? No. I'm not gonna use a guide. Not gonna use a guide. I'll use the instruction manual. The tree in a dead end at the green forest. Ah, gotcha. Oh, and there's a hint for level 9, the last one. I'll read that one while at it. By the way, the electronic manual that the Virtual Console version has does not provide this information. Oh boy, a lot of rooms at level 9. Let me get the silver arrow. Yep, Ganon is finished now. Before playing this game again for this review, I was going to give it a 7 out of 10. I remember this game being too hard to beat without a guide, and I did beat it the first time with one, but that was in 2014, and playing it again now for this review, I can see that my brain has developed more since 2014. I'm pleasantly surprised to say that this game is better than I remember, and while I would still give this game a 7, this game is a product of its time, so I'm going to adjust my expectations that are appropriate for when it came out, so I'm going to give this game an 8 out of 10. I admit I will not replay this game again for a long time. I have not touched the second quest due to lack of interest, but I do respect this game for kicking off what is my favorite game series. I do appreciate that it challenges my brain more than any other Zelda game. It's practically required to use outside resources to beat this game. I don't blame people my age for using a guide, and while I did not use a guide this time, I did use a map of the overworld from the internet and the instruction manual to get information that the game itself could not provide. This game is doable to beat without a guide, but without the resources I mentioned, you will probably be using a guide for this one. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and take care.